BCI, I mean, the idea of BCI, I think, is as old as mankind is. It's the old idea and the old dream that you can use thoughts and can measure the thoughts and then change the world with your thoughts, influence the world just by thinking. That's not a new idea. That's described in the old antique writings, that this was always a desire of mankind to do this. Now, in the history, of course, of science, the development of BCI was tightly coupled to the development of technology, of easy to use, non-invasive technology to measure brain activity. And there are two basic historic sources. One are the basic science animal experiments, and the second source is the so-called neurofeedback or biofeedback history. Both are very important. The animal basic science tradition used primarily monkeys to train monkeys to increase and decrease firing rates of single cells, mainly in the motor cortex, to move a limb. So the monkey thinks a particular movement, and when he thinks it right, the activity of the single cells is transmitted to the fingers and to the arm, and the monkey can then move by just thinking, can move an arm or an artificial arm or prosthetic device. These experiments were very important because they showed that you can learn, or a monkey can learn, to do with only his brain activity highly complex movements like feeding himself by just using 30 to 40 cells, which is surprising when you think how complex such a movement is, like grabbing a reward and putting it into your mouth. So that taught us that the brain is not as complicated as we always thought, and that with training you can make it more simple. So that was the one side. The other side is the tradition of biofeedback or neurofeedback, which started in the late 60s in the US when people trained other people with EEG to increase or decrease voluntarily particular patterns of the brain activity. It started with the alpha waves because they are so dominant in the brain. Whenever you're relaxed, you close your eyes, you're awake, you close your eyes, you have a lot of this high amplitude, 8 to 12 hertz, very regular rhythm, which is important for, I should say, for the relaxation of the nervous tissue, particularly when you're very attentive. And the first person who did it was a Japanese American named Joe Kamiya. And he showed that he can train with a few hours. People can manipulate their brain activity just by looking at the computer, watching their brain activity on the computer in the shape of a color, or he hears it. And basically everybody can learn to increase and decrease alpha waves. And later on it was demonstrated that you can learn with instrumental learning, with reward for brain activity, basically every brain activity you find in the human brain. So this tradition of biofeedback demonstrated that with instrumental learning and reward, you can learn to manipulate and to change even for a long period of times, you can change your own brain activity. Now, the question, of course, which is crucial to judge the usefulness of this technique is, what's the purpose of this? Can you change behavior with it? Can you change a pathology with it? And that answer is not as easy. And in the early tradition of biofeedback, it was claimed, mainly by clinicians, meditation people, that with biofeedback you can change anything. You can cure diseases, severe diseases, you can cure anxiety, you can cure drug dependence, and so forth and so forth. So they overdid, there was the claims were not justified by the scientific results. And so the scientific funding of biofeedback rapidly went down. NSF and NIH and also European funding agencies did, at that time, that was in the 80s, did not fund biofeedback research anymore because they were afraid of the consequences of these clinical claims who were never justified by the data. And biofeedback was kind of forgotten. In the States, it's still a strong in the practice. It's still very often used in practice. In Europe, it has practically no application.